According to the late Zulu shaman Credo Mutwa, ancient African gods were actually real beings who came from the stars. They were called gods because of their advanced knowledge, abilities, and technologies. These gods taught Africans how to create the civilizations that became some of the greatest civilizations on Earth, like ancient Kemet, Kush, and so on.
Africans were communicating with stellar entities since the day when Africa was born.
He also says that Egypt didn't begin where people believe it did. He says it began in southern Africa.
There is a great mistake that scientists are making. They tell you that Egypt was in North Africa. Ag nee meneer, dit is nie so nie. Jong, I speak Afrikaans nogal. Dit is nie so nie. Die land van Egypte was hier so in Suid-Afrika. Here in South Africa, there is a place in the Cape and in a part of Natal where you see all kinds of marks on flat stones. And when you look at these marks are made by boats, ships.
Yes.
The land of Egypt did not begin where fools say it is. The land of Egypt began right here in South Africa, in Natal. It is there where the holy stones were created. It is there where people, if they had some sense in their heads, would be talking with the real gods of heaven. Honorable Menyer, our people did not imagine gods. Our people saw the gods, and they were not the so-called spacemen whom fools think they see today. They were as real as you and I are, and they told our ancestors and ancestresses how to create a civilization in South Africa. This thing, Honorable, you recognize what it is? It is a pharaoh's scepter. We dug it up in a cave here in South Africa, thousands of years ago. Our people spoke with the creatures from the stars. And we are told, we who try to follow the old way, that the ancestors from the stars are going to come again and pay us a visit before great changes occur in this planet. They are not imaginary creatures. They are as real as you and I are. They are not as ugly as the writers of science fiction would have you know. Some are even more beautiful than we are.
The historian Godfrey Higgins wrote, "The originals of all the gods have been of the black race." And Credo Mutwa says the gods who came from the stars and taught Africans how to build civilizations were black. Osiris, for example, was black. So was Isis. So was Krishna. And so was the first Buddha in India. The word Buddha means the awakened one. It's a title, not a name. And the Buddha that most people think of when they hear that word came at a much later stage. His real name was Siddhartha. In fact, the first civilizations in India were created by people who came from Africa. Some of their descendants today are called Dravidians, and they are still dark-skinned. This shouldn't be surprising since humanity originated in Africa, and the genetic mutation that caused pale skin only happened less than 8,000 years ago. So for most of human history, there were only dark-skinned people of African origin on the planet, along with the extraterrestrials that Africans had been in contact with for thousands of years.
So you're saying that it wasn't that other cultures influenced Africans, but that Africans influenced other cultures?
Yes, they did. They did. And if, Mr. David, if we were to study the Sumerian language, 100 out of every 100 words are still found here in South Africa. Antu, Anu, Banu, Vanu, all these are names for human beings. Antu means the children of Antu, of Untu, the god, the mother goddess, Antu. And Anu means children of the god. And these gods were blacks, not white. But it doesn't matter. A god is a god is a god, and he's nasty with it too. Whether he's white or black, he's still the same bloody backside.
So what's the connection between Sumer and that culture, which conventional history calls the cradle of civilization, and Africa? You're saying Africa preceded it and
yes,
influenced it massively.
Africa preceded Sumer by many, many, many centuries. And say, there is something, Mr. David. You know, somebody has got to put the record straight, coldly and fearlessly. We black people, we were the mothers of the Sumerian civilization. There is not a single word in Sumerian but has an exact equivalent in Africa. There is not a single word in ancient Egyptians but has an exact parallel in Africa. We came, and for example, they call the South, Zachariah Sitkins repeatedly refers to the southern part of the world as the Abzu. And the truth, the right pronunciation is not Abzu as in animal zoo. No, it's Abzu. They pronounced the ZU as Tsu. And that is an African word. If we say this person is very dark-skinned, we say Umnyama Tsu. All the gods which were worshipped in Africa, which were worshipped in Sumeria, were actually African gods.
Same with Egypt.
Yes. Ra. Even today, amongst the Botswana people here, the name Ra means father. And the oldest warlike goddess was in Egypt, Hathor or Hathor. In South Africa, she was known as Mahato, the mother of the great footprint.
Is that the footprint that you showed me once?
Yes, sir.
about 6 foot long, isn't it?
Yes. And Mr. David, that footprint is the footprint of a woman, not a man. How do we know? If you are a tracker of people, you will notice that the instep of a woman's foot is slightly different from that of a male foot. Africa gave the world its civilization.
You were telling a story earlier, and I kind of gave a bit of historical context about, you were telling a story about Enki and the relation of that figure to Africa. Could you continue with that story?
Yes, sir. Enki in Africa is known as Ngai or Ngai. He is still worshipped even now amongst the people of Kenya. And there is another god, a deity, called Uru Wantai. Uru means old, or grand, or majestic. Uru. And in Africa, you go to Zimbabwe, in Africa, the word for great is Kuru, and in Zululand, Kulu. The word Kuru or Kulu also refers to a grandmother. And here is another thing talking about grandmothers. A grandmother is called Gogo in Zulu. This immediately joins African language to Greek language. The word Gogo means wise, old, leading person. And the word occurs also in Greece as Gogos. Gogos means a leader. From this comes the English word Gog, as pedagogue.
Are you saying that there was once one universal language, or at least a new language was introduced by the Star people, and it went out from Africa and changed slightly?
Yes,
that's why you can still understand
this
it.
Is what I'm saying, and I'm saying that defiantly because it is true. And Lila means to cry out. Ena means king, and Lil means a shout or a voice shouting. So if a god is called En-Lil, it means the Lord of the commanding voice. And En-Lil had a wife. Her name, wait for this, was Nina Lila. Nina means a female. And in Africa, even now, go to Zululand, what is the name for a mother in Zululand? Nina, Nina, Nina. If I say the mother of David, I say Unina ka Davida. The word Nina is the name of a female entity.
I've also read, Crayla, that genetic research has suggested, at least one study, that all of humanity can be traced back to a single female in Africa,
Of course.
about 200,000 years ago, something like that. Does that fit with what you come across?
Yes, I had the great friend, Professor Raymond Dart, and with him we studied these things. He gave me the original words, and I could find similarities in Africa.
So you think that humanity was seeded in Africa and then went out from Africa?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Come up with.
Yes, Mr. David. Otherwise, why are there so many hundreds of Indo-European words in the African language even now? Why are there words in the Indian language which are similar to African words?
It is very important to realize that Africa is an exploded star, a shattered diamond, and that its pieces have to be followed in all the continents. You cannot have a sense of what was essentially African just by going into Africa. You have to look into Europe, into Asia, into America. I have been associated for a long time with the American thesis, the establishment of an African presence in early America. But that is just a part, it's just one part of the whole story. What we are trying to achieve is a synthesis of the African presence all over the world. The African presence in Europe, which I'm dealing with tonight, is tremendously important, just as important as the African presence in early America. Because it really begins at the very beginning. Because there are no Europeans on this planet until about 55 to 50,000 years ago, whereas there are Africans going back 3 million years. You have all heard of Lucy. Lucy goes back 3.5 million years, but Lucy, found in Ethiopia, is not really a complete human being. It's what is known as a hominid, but it does not have the brain size of modern man. Okay, so the mere fact that man was born in Africa is in itself not important. I want you to note that what we have discovered over the last 5 years is far more important. We have not simply discovered that man was born in Africa. What has been discovered recently is that the last man was born in Africa, and that all human beings now on this earth are anatomically African. In other words, the brain, an organism that we all occupy, is African, whatever the skin color, etc.
There are many people who claim that it's an impossible and baseless theory. So these people who claim that the out-of-Africa migration theory is false seem to not be well educated on the matter, especially since it wasn't just one out-of-Africa migration that occurred in ancient times, but there were multiple migrations that occurred over time.
For the discoveries of the last few years to have made an impact is only possible because of the fact that it is coming from the very best universities. One of them, Oxford, which is an extremely conservative university, is the first to come out to announce, after study of mitochondrial DNA, the first to announce that there is no doubt that the founding population of the modern world was African. That is very important because man being born in Africa is not the same thing. Because man could have been born in Africa, and it was argued he went out into Europe at a low-level stage, which he did, Homo erectus, not a proper complete man, and then came Neanderthal man, and then came Grimaldi man. But what they find is that all of these stages of man are African. Every one. Africa is the only place that has the complete sequence of all the stages of man. So it is not only the first incomplete or extremely primitive, low-level brain man that is born there, but the highest form of man, modern man, was born there. So you see all the stages. The first 3 stages died out, the last 3 stages moved into Europe, Asia, and the rest of Africa, and then they died out until eventually Africa produced the complete man, which is the man we have today, modern man. They find that man in Africa about 100 to 140,000 years ago. So even though Lucy, we found Lucy 3.5 million years ago, Lucy is not modern man. Okay, modern man only goes back about 140,000. Some people put it at 200,000. What has also been established by Rebecca Cann is that all the creatures now on this planet can be traced to one black woman who lived about 150,000 years ago. They have been able to do this with great precision because the instruments we have now, the way we can go into the blood and find out the history of man, we know that only the black has all the genes. So they can find out at what point you have these variations and mutations. Now, how did it happen? In the sense that how did the Europeans happen? How did they come into being? The African, as I say, occupied Europe. There are no Europeans in Europe about 50 to 55,000 years ago. The African peoples the whole world. However, the final man, Grimaldi man, is caught in Europe. He's caught in a certain ice circle. There's a period known as the worm interstadial, and he's caught in the ice. There are parts of Europe that are covered by ice half a mile thick. The African in that area, wherever he produces the albino, and the African produces pink people, even without mixtures, the Africa produces a pink type occasionally. That pink type is usually a type that dies easily, because if you produce an albino in Africa, he would suffer from devastating skin cancers. However, the albino that the African produced in Europe became a selected type, because in the darkness of Europe, the twilight of Europe, the ice of Europe, where you did not have the direct and intense sunlight, the albino or albino type began to survive and to be selected. So that after a while, you find a number of pink-skinned Africans with African morphology, that is the nose, mouth, the jaw remaining the same, but only the skin changing. And of course, whenever there is skin color change, pigmentation change, you also have eye color change, hair color change. That change was necessary in some places because the ice made it impossible. The situation in ice Europe, not present Europe, not temperate zones, but the ice situation created a serious problem. It created a serious problem because pigmentation does not allow for all the light in twilight zones to come into the skin. Now, sometimes this could be the vitamin D deficiency that may result can be remedied by fishing. Like you find in certain zones where there's a lot of fish, you may still find fairly dark types like the Eskimo. Of course, there are other reasons for the Eskimo still retaining, in many cases, a dark color even though he's in the ice. But you find these changes going on. And then you find in Asia, as the African moves into Asia, you find in some parts the epicantic fold, the fold coming across the eye, like in the Japanese, some of the Chinese, etc. Because this becomes necessary as you move against certain kinds of winds on the steppes. So man's morphology, that is, man's superficial face, has nothing to do with his brain or his internal organism. That is just a cover. In other words, man's cover varies, but man's internality, man's internal organism, his brain, does not vary. And that internal organism, that brain, and that thing that is covered by the skin is African, because all the stages were African.